per the event description, you can join with us and ask some questions. But for the most part, we like to make this fun and, interactive as much as we can. So we'll talk a little bit, open it up, and then we'll talk about some wine. But just before we get started, a little bit about Brut Detroit. We're a mobile bar, events, and catering company. So we do lots of wine tastings. Well, I should say pre-COVID, we did lots of wine tastings and lots of fun stuff around town. And we also have kind of this private event side where we work with, weddings and corporate clients and such to help elevate their party needs. So we have bartenders, we have some fun bar rentals, and we do some catering stuff. But we've been around Detroit for coming on 5 years. And so one of the big things that is kind of near and dear to us is just really having fun and bringing community together. Using wine as a great level setter to make sure people have a good time and lower barriers and have good conversations. And so while we do all those other things, that's really what's kind of at the heart of what we do and why we do it. And we always felt like the Mawby folks up north had that similar, vibe to them. Their tasting room up there is very inviting, lots of hooting and hollering and good times. And so we formed a great friendship. 3 years ago, I don't remember. It feels like it was a while. And so we've kind of worked on a few different events together. And when I was kind of thinking about this conference and what we might kind of offer to folks who are attending, the business of wine kind of popped up as Mike and I were talking. And Mike, I should also introduce, sorry, Mike. So Mike is there as well. He's kind of our founding sommelier. Brut Detroit wouldn't exist without him. And a sommelier is just a fancy word for someone who's really good at knowing about wine. So we kind of joke he's our wine guy, or he does all of our most of our wine tastings. And so if you come to one of our events, you'll see him. He knows quite a bit about the, wine in general, the industry. He's been around for a very long time. Didn't mean that as a dig at all, Mike, sorry. So if you have any questions in general, he's a great guy to ask. And then certainly, of course, Claire, but she's been at Mawby for, a good chunk of time, and she's been working in I think a unique position to be able to watch the company evolve. And so when we were talking about the business of wine, Mawby came to mind immediately as a great example of a winery that's been able to evolve with the times, as Mike said, and kind of offer a really great product in a lot of different ways to folks. And then also be kind of, like I said, that communal kind of outwardly facing business that really engages people and brings them from all walks of life to their kind of front door. So with that said, I'd like to kind of throw it off to Claire to introduce herself a little bit more. And then maybe you could tell us your story about how you got to Mawby.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Happy Monday. I'm up north, too. I live in Traverse City, and it's been raining all day. I don't have beach hair. I have quarantine hair. So Mawby Sparkling Wine is a really special spot. I think out of any winery or any in the wine industry in general, but especially in Michigan, we've been around for a long time. Our founder, Larry Mawby, planted his first vines in 1973. The oldest vines at our tasting room and vineyard in Sutton's Bay were planted in 1976, and he made his first wine in 1978. So we're one of the oldest up there, and we've weathered a lot, literally and figuratively. I found Mawby. I'm from the area. I grew up in Traverse City. I went to Michigan State University, go green, and they have a viticulture and enology program, and I was able to take courses through that. And that just led to many other opportunities. It opened many doors. And I think what's interesting about wine is so many people who find themselves working in this position have a similar story, that it maybe wasn't something that they planned on doing. When you're in high school, your high school counselor certainly isn't saying you should go work in the alcohol industry. So it's something that, like myself, many people kind of stumble upon and find a fit. So I was able to work with the Michigan Grape and Wine Council as an intern. I was a journalism major, so I was able to do freelance writing for Lansing-based newspapers. And then through the enology program, I made some connections in New Zealand, and I moved to New Zealand to work on the grape production, on wine production side of things. So that was a very different experience from being behind a tasting bar or being at public-facing events. You're getting, dirty and wet and climbing out of tanks and up and down barrels and long nights, but it was a blast. And I left New Zealand. I moved to Sonoma County, California to do a similar thing, work at a custom crush facility, working with some really exciting wine producers. And then I went to Australia, and then I went back to California with a lot of bopping around. The way that grapes work with our two different hemispheres, you could kind of work in the northern hemisphere and then bop down to the southern hemisphere and go back and forth, which is what I did. I was in my 20s and I didn't have a couch or a cat or any responsibilities. It was great. And then I settled in Healdsburg, California, and stayed at one winery. I had one address. My mom was thrilled. I was kind of settled for a little bit, and I worked more in the tasting room. I did marketing. I did events. I had a child, and I really missed home and being far away from my family who's still here in northern Michigan. So I came back, and Mawby was hiring, and it was a really great fit. And I knew moving back to Traverse City, I didn't have to work in wine. There's certainly a wine industry here. There's a very strong beverage industry between breweries and distilleries, meaderies, cideries. But I thought, if I'm going to work for a winery, how incredible is it to be able to work for Larry Mawby because of his history and his background. So it will be 5 years that I've been there in October, which is absolutely mind-blowing. So that's me, all over.
It's got to be fun. I can imagine there's a lot of differences between, or maybe not, differences between U.S. wineries and wineries across the world.
Yeah, I think like anything you have, like any industry, there's big guys and little guys, and there's certainly difficulties that we all share, especially with making wine. It's agriculture, so we rely on Mother Nature to really give us a very specific set of heat and a little bit of rain, but not too much rain, and it affects the big guys just as much as little guys too. So there's a great sense of camaraderie in the wine industry, which is very appealing, and I've always loved, and probably why I'm still doing it.
Yeah, and I think something too that I don't think really hit me too much until maybe Mike and I started talking more about wine, but just the fact that in general, we think of wine as just what's in our glass. We don't necessarily take the time as consumers to think about what happens prior to getting to that point. And, at the end of the day, a lot of these people are just farmers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Agriculture. And so it's, it's a very kind of holistic type of kind of earthy group at the point where the grapes are starting to be developed, and then you can have fun and create the wine once you get them off the vine. But yeah, so we don't take the time to really understand that piece. It's kind of just what's the sexy drink in front of you, or the cheers in your glass. So okay, well, so what's it like to work, like a typical day working at a winery? What does that look like? Kind of take us beyond the glass.
Yeah, I, like many, I'm sure, throughout the conference this week, just talking to entrepreneurs and people, and then people in long established positions, you wear a lot of hats. And I think that sounds like a cliche, but it's very true. I do marketing and wine club management primarily, so every day is different. Every day usually involves like a lot of emails and checking in on social media. It's also a lot of customer interaction and interfacing, which I really enjoy. We But then everything is very different now, obviously, as you know, we're Zooming this conference. So I might just jump into that because we officially reopened 3 weeks ago after being closed for just a little over 2 months. And so how things used to be, and when everything closed down, we were still on winter hours, so it's a little bit of a drive up to Sutton's Bay. You'd see, a few people on a Friday afternoon. Saturdays, weekends would pick up a bit, but it's a much mellower vibe in the off season. And we were just kind of wrapping up. The end of March is when we're wrapping up a big Fizz Club run, a big Fizz Club shipment. And then you kind of start to switch to summer mode. Even though you're not going to be open full time till the end of May, you start thinking about staffing, you start thinking about any changes to the service you want to make, and you just slowly get into that summer mode. And then everything shut down, and I know the word pivot is being used a lot, but it just is the perfect word to describe what so many of us in all industries had to do. So it's been exhausting, I think, these last couple of months for so many people, because you're thinking all the time. You're constantly thinking. I mean, there'd be so many late night text messages and emails about ideas. What if we try this? What if we try this? And so we really focused right away on our DTC, our direct-to-consumer sales, because we knew that we wouldn't be able to have people in the tasting room. We have a fairly wide range in terms of our portfolio of wines. We have at any given time about 15 different wines from dry to sweet. But there is a core in that portfolio. The Detroit, which some of you may be tasting, is certainly a popular one. Our most popular wine is a sparkling rosé called Sex. We have a bottle fermented Blanc de Blanc style. And so we knew that we had enough of a loyal base and a backbone and a knowledge of our brand and our wines, that by pushing out e-commerce sales was going to be successful for us. And it was. Our numbers in April were through the roof. We really felt so grateful and very supportive for everyone who needed wine, because everyone's been drinking a lot of wine during quarantine. And they knew us and they trusted us, and they knew that we were going to be delivering a product that was going to be familiar to them. So then we found out that we could reopen, and up here in our zone, I think we found out on a Monday that we could open that Friday. And we had been doing some planning, and we had been kind of making all those what-if scenarios, and plan A, plan B, plan C, and then it just got very fast and very serious. That weekend was also Memorial Day weekend, which is traditionally the kickoff of summer up here. It's a big weekend with a lot of visitors coming in, and we just knew that we were not prepared and that we were not ready for that. And some of that was very mental and emotional. We didn't know if we were ready for opening our doors and having a lot of people in. Part of it was logistics. We had a really hard time we had hand sanitizer, but couldn't get dispensers. We had a really hard time finding thermometers, trying to get some masks made up. Just being able to tick some of those PPE boxes. And then we are very fortunate with our staff. We have an amazing, amazing staff that works with us seasonally. And your staff is so important to your business, no matter what it is. And their personalities and their energy and their love for Mawby wines it's what's made us so successful. We really do believe that. But a lot of them are actually teachers, and so they have the summers off, or they are retired. And we knew that not everyone was going to be comfortable coming back or ready to come back, or as the teachers were still kind of wrapping up and figuring out the whole e-learning school that they had been doing. So we paused, we reeled everything in, and then we officially opened June 3rd. And service is a little different. The day-to-day looks a little different, but it's been great. We feel very fortunate. It's been great.
I can't imagine.
That was a lot. I talked a long time.
No, that's great. No, I'm just trying to wrap my brain around. I don't know if anybody in the session has been to the Mawby wine tasting room, but it's just a small, sweet little kind of space that is very engaging, and you walk in and it's kind of designed to pull you in and move you around the room, and you get to experience some different stuff. And like I said, there's always hooting and hollering and they're ringing bells and stuff, and it's a really great place. And so I can just imagine, and I think a lot of businesses too, I've even thought about it as we start to do events again, just how do you maintain that engagement and that experience for the customers that kind of stuck it out with you during this time, and because you get a lot of repeat business, right? And then for the new folks that haven't had a chance to experience that, will they kind of walk away with that same level of, oh my gosh, that was so much fun, I can't wait to go back? And your product specifically speaks for itself. People love what you produce, and I think the tasting room is that communal space for you to then impart that really lively spirit that you have with those folks as they leave. So I can imagine that it's probably different for your staff. It's different for the guests, but I have a hard time believing that they're not walking away feeling very excited about your products and their experiences.
Yeah, that was we say a lot that we have guests come to the tasting room, and a lot of repeat visitors and a lot of first timers. And the tasting room is beautiful. The views are beautiful. It's a really fun time, and the wine is great. And what we do for people is we capture that moment in a bottle. And so when people are back downstate or in Chicago or at their home and they see the wine at the store, they're transported back to sitting on our tasting deck and looking at that view and being with their friends and family. So they're able to repeat that experience wherever they are.
Yep.
And that's really added to our success. And so the goal has been to keep that and say, hey, this is still Mawbiness. You're still going to have a great time. There's still going to be great views. It is going to look a little different. And honestly, people have been very understanding. We've just been really, it's been very heartwarming to know that we think we're kind of making the right decisions and people are still having a good time.
Yeah.
So fingers crossed.
Well, that's just who you are too. So I think, personally for me, I know that when I have people over, we're going to have red, we're going to have sex, we're going to have Detroit. I know that sounds a little weird, we're going to have sex, but these are the things we're going to have on the table just because we're having, it's like social, it's fun, it's, and especially summertime, these are kind of the staples in my pantry. So, but I'm curious so you're the marketing manager, you manage the Fizz Club, which is the wine club for Mawby. And and we're talking about this exciting, engaging tasting room that you have, and what this particular bottle represents when you. I don't know where my camera is going. This exciting bottle that you have when you open it, it brings back those memories. But how do you, as a marketing manager, get that point across to newbies when you use social media platforms or your targeted marketing, anything like that? What are kind of some of your go-tos?
We actually, it's all very visual. The Instagram is probably the most successful, I think, platform for us, just in terms of engagement and, likes and the things that it generates in terms of comments. When Instagram added stories a couple of years ago, and then they added the ability to, for people to tag you in their stories, then you could save those to your feed. We don't consider ourselves, like an Instagrammable brand, but we get tagged in a lot of stuff. We get included in a lot of people's Instagram stories, and that's wonderful on many levels. It's gratifying because we know that we're doing something right. But then it's also really handy because we have a lot of UCG, which is UGC, user-generated content, which is free. And I don't have to be out somewhere taking a picture. Someone can take a really amazing picture or do something really cool with a photo of our bottle and some neat filters on it. And you can reach out to them, and 99% of the time they're thrilled to be asked and to be included. And that's been really great to make sure that our followers and our fans really feel like they are a part of Mawby. And then it's wonderful for us to be able to have some really unique images and story points to share. So Instagram has been great. We did not have an account when I started. So we're just kind of ticking away at followers. We also do a lot with newsletters. That's what we found to be certainly the most valuable in terms of just ROI. We use MailChimp, and just the return there is really great. The segmenting that they can do is really great and really powerful. One thing that's tricky is alcohol is tricky on a million levels to make. It's not hard to enjoy, but there's so many rules and regulations involved with alcohol. And for wine, we can't just ship wine wherever we want to ship it.
Right.
Here's a little history lesson. When they repealed Prohibition, they put alcohol laws back in the state's control. So we as a winery have to have a permit to ship to each individual state that we want to ship to. And each state is able to make up any set of rules and regulations that they want in order to be able to ship there. So the amount that you can ship there, the taxes that are involved, it's wine compliance is a big thing. I don't know of any Michigan-based wine compliance companies, but if anyone is out there looking for something to do, it could be really onto something, because it is a lot of work. So where I'm going with this is where the email marketing and the segmentation that we can do now really comes in handy, is that we can say, hey, Pennsylvania, we just got our permit to be able to ship to Pennsylvania, and we can just target those people who are in that area. We can maybe offer them a little bit a deal. We have a whole kind of welcome to Mawby, this is who we are email, and you're getting that instead of you getting that email all the time, and you're like, I know who Mawby is, I know what's going on. We can really segment and target the message to where it needs to be, and so email is really powerful for us as well.
Cool. So I kind of want to circle back around a little bit and talk about because we're talking about your customers, but those are, you know, the consumers that purchase the bottles, but you also have other customers too, right? So you do serve the you know, other wineries, you do have other sources of revenue, and you also just kind of play a role in the local economy as well. Can you talk a little bit about other things that you do beyond just, you know, selling a bottle of wine?
Yeah, we do. We are very lucky that we do have a pretty large retail side of things. And I was going to try to get some numbers earlier, but we sell more volume-wise through retail channels. Wine shops, Meijer. We are at every Meijer and every Kroger in the state of Michigan, and so we're working on growing that relationship. But then we are able to do some, you know, cool things just on a smaller level. When you have that base there, you have that base of we're shipping, you know, 10,000 cases of sex across the state of Michigan. That becomes that financial base that we can do some other really cool things. I think I understand what the question is.
And it doesn't help that my internet just went out for a second. So.
I'd like to think that Larry Mawby, our founder, he's been around for a very long time, and he's a mentor for so many people in the industry on many different levels. We try to give back, if that's kind of what you're asking, just in terms of having some charitable components to things that we do. We've always been really involved with the Leelanau Conservancy, and that's been part of the message from the beginning. And I think as a business, when you have that message and you stick to it, it becomes really powerful, and it becomes something that people use the word authentic a lot, but I think that that's something that we offer is a really authentic experience in the tasting room, an authentic wine in the bottle, and we're really authentic about what we believe in. So we have a program called Green Giving, and we have a wine called Green, and $1 from every bottle sold in the tasting room or online is donated to one of 3 local partners, and that's been really fun to do. Last year, I think we raised just over $5,000, and despite everything now going on, we're still on track to beat that number. So being a part of the community and showing that you care is, I think now more important than ever. I mean, even if you're very small or new, you can still make that impact, which is important.
That's awesome. I did not actually know that about Green. And so I just learned something new, which is really fun, especially the social impact piece. So, but I was trying to hit at just some of the other ways that Mawby sells wine. Do you only have one customer that comes through the tasting room, or one type of customer segment, if you will, or are there other ways that you guys are involved in generating revenue for the winery?
Yeah, got it. So we have a pretty diverse customer base, which we feel fortunate about. A couple of of course, we're very lucky that way. We make 2 different styles of sparkling wine. We have the Detroit, as an example, is a tank fermented wine. So none of the bottled products are carbonated. The bubbles all occur naturally, just like they would in a traditional champagne style. In the Detroit and Sex, and a couple others, the Green, these are tank fermented, which means the bubbles happen on a really large scale in a large stainless steel vessel, and then they go in the bottle. It goes in the bottle. And then we have our bottle fermented wines, which I mentioned Blanc. We have a wine called Talisman. We have a couple of vintage based wines, and those bubbles happen again naturally, but in the bottle. So it's going to be more like a traditional champagne method. So, and I'm sure Mike can talk a lot more about all of that. But so we have this base, and we have a range. We have a wine called Sandpiper, which is only available in the tasting room, and it's $12 a bottle. And then we go all the way up to, again, that vintage 100% Pinot Noir from 2012, and I think it's $60 a bottle. So that definitely helps with sales because, again, we can get Sex and Detroit priced really comfortably and really attractively at places like Meijer or Kroger. And then we have on the other end kind of some higher end wines that can do really well at wine shops, at restaurants. We also, we have a couple wines that are in kegs, which has been a really great way to diversify and get more things out there. Wine in a keg is going to last longer, so there's several places around that have Sex on tap. It's great. It's great for the environment. It's great for a cost perspective from everyone. So that's something that we do. And we're slowly working on being able to ship to more states, direct to consumer, and getting more distributors in more states to be able to expand that reach. We have a pretty robust, well, we do. We have a great little airport here in Traverse City, and up until recently, they bring in a lot of flights. It's really robust. They do a lot of direct flights in the summer, so you don't have to fly through Detroit or Chicago. They have direct flights to Colorado and Texas and New York. And that's been a great partnership, just being able to look at trends and look at numbers and see, well, you got a lot of people coming in from Texas. Let's look at how we can get into Texas. So that's knowledge that we use. And it's a great partnership that we have.
Hey, Claire, one of the things that always impressed me about all the wineries in and around Traverse City was their camaraderie, their willingness to help other wineries. So you have a pretty specialized production facility for bubbles that a lot of other wineries probably don't have or do not have. Do you assist the others? I mean, not all the wineries up there make a sparkling wine,
right?
But do you help the other wineries with some of their sparkling wine?
We do. We have a couple really unique, really specialized, really expensive pieces of equipment, and we can justify having those because we do help several wine producers in the region and in the state finish their wines to get those bubbles in there. And it's, you use the perfect word. It's the camaraderie. It's very supportive. We love bubbles. We think they're just the best way to drink wine. They go with so many different foods. They're so fun. And we think the more that are out there, the better, because then people are able to just incorporate them more, maybe not their daily lives, but their weekly lives. They're not just for New Year's Eve and your anniversary. So we really enjoy being able to work with other winemaking partners across the state to get bubbles out there.
And let me ask.
Oh, sorry, Mike.
Let me ask, and then maybe jump on ahead a little bit. You, without getting too technical, you pretty much produce two types of bubbles. One is called it's the Charmat method, which is a tank method, the large method.
Yes.
The other is the secondary fermentation is done within the bottle. And that is, for instance, Grace and Blanc. You now produce bubbles in cans. which I have here with me, and have just got into the market. I work for Plum Market in Ann Arbor, so just brought the cans into Plum. Can you explain? Canned wine has become very popular. Can you explain kind of the decision process, or what you knew about the decision process to move ahead with cans? And I think you did cans last year on a smaller scale, but have kind of bumped up the production.
Yeah, that's a great question. Cans are, they're all the rage. I mean, it went from maybe 1 or 2 to there's probably a whole huge section just at your local supermarket for them. Cans are something that I personally have been harping about to Mike Lang, the owner and winemaker, for a long time. I think that they are fun. I love how portable they are. I thought it was something that we could do in a fun way and that could fit in our brand and in that range that our brand does offer. So we started off really we have our cellar master is actually he's like a beer guy. He's really into beer, but he loves to tinker and experiment. And so he kind of came up with the initial idea and he's a big tea drinker. So he had this idea to infuse our wine with locally made tea. And that was the start of it. We knew we didn't want something that was going to be too sweet. We knew that it was going to have to be bubbly. And we were also aware of alcohol content. All of our wines are right around 11% alcohol, which that's not too bad. But when you put that in a can, what a lot of people don't realize is a can of wine is essentially half a bottle of wine. And so if you are drinking a can that's at 11, 12, 13% alcohol, and when you're sipping it out of the can, you drink it faster. It's like, when you're drinking a beer, it just goes down faster, and you've consumed half a bottle of wine in maybe shorter time than you normally would. So we also really want to be aware of the alcohol content. So our canned products, Mawby Bubs, are carbonated, and they are right around 6% alcohol. So what we did as an experiment is we bought a little crowler, which is like a hand canning machine, and we bought some cans and made some stickers. We put this experimental wine in a keg last year. We had it ready just in time for the 4th of July, just to gauge people's interest and to get some feedback before we invested in everything else that would be involved with the can. And I think that's a great thing for businesses to do across the board, is to check in with your customers. And so we had it right there in the tasting room, and we tweaked things. The product that we were sampling last year, what we have now in the cans, isn't totally the same thing, because we did get some feedback that was really helpful. Cans, they're new, they're fun. We've got great support. They just started getting distributed throughout the state. So thank you for having them down at Plum. And it's trendy, but we think it's going to stick around, and we're really happy with what we came up with.
Well, I do agree they're trendy. I don't know if you can see this, but
sunlight.
So that sunlight. I also have Tropic. Mm-hmm. So whoever designed the cans or the labeling on the can did a fantastic job, because they really do stand out above and beyond all the other cans that at least we have in the market. And it leads to a lot of questions. It leads to a lot of, what is this? And you've labeled them Bubs instead of Bubbly, which I think was a great idea. And I have to say they're fantastic. So
thank you.
I think it was cans are the new thing. And I think it was great that you guys took that step to to produce in cans now. So I'm imagining that has changed your production facility a little bit.
A little. We use a mobile canning line this round. There's actually one that's based here in Michigan, and they can for a couple other wineries up here. There is, I believe, someone up here is going to be purchasing a canning line so that we wouldn't have to do the mobile route. And so that's kind of the beauty of this experiment, is seeing how successful are they, how big could this potentially be, and then what sort of investment do we put in. And I wanted to say thank you. The design was a team effort. We worked with a kind of newer designer in the area, but one thing that was very important, and I know Nicole is going to touch on this, is just about a year ago, we did a huge rebrand. So on top of and that involved all of our labels changing, we essentially consolidated 2 smaller brands into one brand. And that was another example of asking our customers just some questions. We did a pretty in-depth customer survey, and we're fortunate that we have this great wine, so we could say, hey, fill out the survey and you might win a case of wine. So we had a lot of responses. We worked with a local company here, and just to get people's perceptions of who do they think Mawby is, what do they see us as, where do they buy us, where do they want to see us. And there was certainly, a bit of an investment in that, but we learned so much. And one big thing that we learned is there were a lot of people that knew our wine names, but not our winery. So they knew Detroit, they knew Sex, but they didn't necessarily connect those with Mawby or at the time, we had 2 different names for our wines based on that production method. So wines that were made in the Charmant method in the big tanks, those were called M. Lawrence. And then wines made in the bottle were called Al Mawby. And she did not connect those 2 brands. The labels had a different look. And that was... It was kind of a bummer, you thought, we thought more people knew this, but we knew that it was causing confusion on store shelves. It was affecting our retail space because they would have some of the wines over here and some of the wines over here. So that feedback that we got helped to speed up this rebrand, which was big and scary, and we're still all kind of getting used to it. And then we knew we ended up introducing this 3rd beverage in a can, so it all had to kind of tie in some way. It's been a very, very busy 15 months, but we're feeling pretty good.
And then there was COVID too, right?
And then yeah. We're certainly kept on our toes.
Yeah, what strikes me about what you're saying is just that you are an established business. You have an established brand, and you're still taking the time to
that was
learn
my favorite cover because she was
and pivot and understand more about how your brand evolves with your customers. And I think that's amazing. And then I forget what the second thing was. Probably because I don't drink Detroit. But I think in general, it's just this idea that no matter how mature you are as a business, there are still some fundamentals that you have to tap into to make sure that you're staying fresh for your clientele, right? Your customers. So your COVID pivot example, and then certainly this tapping right back in, doing your market research on who you guys are at this moment. I think that speaks to just, always having to go back to the basics, right? And know who you're talking to, know your audience. So But not only did you guys go through a rebrand, you went through an ownership transition. And so how did that change, some of the day-to-day or even just, just life at the winery?
Yeah. Larry Mawby, our founder, our patron saint of bubbles, our fearless leader, he had been, he's wonderful. He is a wordsmith. He's a farmer. He is for such a long time, he was the brand and he was the story. And as the brand grew and as our range of wines grew, we started exclusively making sparkling wine in 2000. So we've been doing it for a long time, but we started making still wines. Larry started years ago making still wines, and then what he realized was our climate up here is really ideal for growing grapes to make sparkling wine. Sparkling wine grapes, you can pick them a little bit earlier, so there's not as much threat from frost or rain or birds. You need a lower sugar and a higher acidity, and a lot of the grapes that grow, especially in northern Michigan, tend to be a little more acidic. So he dialed that in pretty early, and again created a space. And years ago, you could go in and it would be Larry sitting there pouring the wine for you that he had put in the bottle, that he had put the label on by hand, that he had corked, that he had picked. And that's amazing. And we've grown. And I actually don't know how old Larry is, but he was ready to step back from the day-to-day operations. And a partner, he'd been buying grapes from a family, the Lang family, for years. And they had come in as partners, and I think 2008 or so. And so they had two sons, Mike and Pete. And so they've been slowly preparing to kind of take on some bigger roles. But just like with anything, there's this feeling of an end of an era. That's Larry Mawby. His name is on the bottle. It's on the banners. There's so many stories. I mean, the connections that he made. We get pictures of people with old bottles or old labels. So many people come in with these great Larry stories. So how do you take that person that was the brand and draw all of that out and still have the brand without having him be there as the day-to-day? And one, he's got a great last name. We're like, I don't know, Mawby. It's just a great name. It flows off it sounds kind of bubbly. We're very grateful that happens to be his last name. But we coined this term called Mawbiness, and it's a feeling that Larry created just by being himself. And so we use this idea of Mawbiness as a touch point for when we're making design decisions or marketing decisions. And Larry's involved with that. He was in today. The way he put it is, he said, I don't want to fight with the printer every day. And we do have a terrible printer. So he's not in the day-to-day, but he's certainly around and always available, and really helping us as we kind of as this younger generation falls into these new roles, and really hopefully do everyone very proud.
Mawbiness, I like that. Sorry, I'm muting myself. So I guess after all of that said and done, there's that nostalgia of having Larry, and then there's also the nuts and bolts of transitioning a company into consolidating the brands and crafting a new kind of path ahead. What are some things that, especially being an established business and being with the company and seeing, like Mawby in pre-transition to now being with the Langs, what are some things that now that you didn't know then, that have, if you could kind of hop back in time and tell your former self,
Don't
you know,
do that.
some
Yeah.
tools of the trade, what are some things that you learned now after the dust has started to settle, I should say?
I think that I think ultimately to trust your gut, and there's decisions that, you know, not everyone was on board with everything. We have a small team but a good team, and I think trusting your gut when it's right, and trusting your gut to speak up. There were certainly some things that people didn't agree with, and we were vocal about them, and it made for some interesting discussions. But I think we have a very open, our team is very trusting, and we're all very professional, and we respect each other a lot. And so our conversations, those times could be heated. They were what needed to happen. And I think we handled some very big things really well. I would trust the workflow. That I do not work that way. My work is like, I'm the disorganized one. And Mike Lang, he was a high school math teacher. So he Excel spreadsheets, and he would do all of these workflows with tasks and dates. And honestly, at first I just thought, I was not about it. I wasn't impressed. I just thought it was too much minutia. But it really helped us stay on track. And I think finding, if someone has a method to the madness or a way to keep things on track and organized, to really try to embrace it. And, you know, I never really filled it out right. Somehow I turned a whole page blue. I'm like, I don't know how I did it, but everything's in there. So I would go and tell my former self to just go with that work plan, because it's really, when you have so many moving pieces, having a plan is really, really important. And I would tell myself to probably give us all a little more time. You know, we had a pretty ambitious timeline, and we weren't able to stick to it 100%, of course. But building in a little more buffer, a little more time. There's so many things out of your control. And especially from just a marketing perspective, getting things out there. We're so lucky in Michigan to have people from Michigan are so proud to be from Michigan, and so proud of all of the things that we make and create and do here. And we have found that media across the state is always so supportive and interested in hearing our stories. And so I think probably reaching out to them, drafting up a press release, send it to, Channel 7, send it everywhere, because you never know what is going to intrigue people, or what's really going to, where they're going to see that story coming from. And I think we could have done more of it, and even earlier, to really just get the word out. Because more times than not, people want to hear your story, especially if it's doing something really great for Michigan.
Absolutely. So now that you've got quite a bit of a resume of all these different wineries and different locations, and just a lot of experience under your belt, what kind of looking back at all of those different experiences, what would you say are some kind of key takeaways that would make a wine business successful?
That's a good question. I think for any business, like I said before, it does so much come down to staff and to who you have representing your brand and your business. It's your baby usually at the beginning there. I think finding the right people in all the roles from the bottom, to the top is really, really important. I think something that helps specifically with wine is to try to be able to, Mike can speak to this for sure. There's so much to learn. There's so many grape varieties. There's so many grape regions. There's so many styles. There's always something to learn. So to continue to educate yourself and your team, and see if you can, go help out at a harvest or hop on a bottling line. I don't know how easy that is to do or legally or anything like that, but I think just that well-roundedness, especially with wine, because it isn't just, it is agriculture, and it isn't just, swirling and sipping all day. There's a lot that goes into it, and a lot of people that work really hard from the production side all the way up to wine shops and retailers and restaurants. So I think the more boxes you can tick and more knowledge you can have, the better, which can be said for any business, really.
Yeah, I think the team part is definitely something that ends up being a critical piece for any business, for sure. Mm-hmm. So I guess to that, on the flip side, what are some things that in all of your experiences, and I want to kind of start winding down to talk a little bit more about Detroit, but what are some things that that you would say are maybe fun facts that people might not know about the wine industry that kind of surprised you along your journey?
I think, that's a tough one. They make wine everywhere. They make wine everywhere. It's amazing. It's been around for such a long time. And that's that knowledge component. There's wine in France and Italy and California, but they make it everywhere. And it's been really cool to taste wines from unexpected places, and to be able to tell people that, I work at a winery in Michigan and that we make wine in Michigan, because for a lot of people, we are also an unexpected place, and they're shocked by that. So it's really, I like to surprise people with that information. And they're not wherever, but most places where you go, grapes just tend to be really beautiful. And that's something that I feel really fortunate about, being able to just have been in some really beautiful parts in the world. But it's great. And really, how nice people are. We talked about that camaraderie. There's a range of personalities everywhere, of course, and I have certainly met, some wine snobs, but for the most part, everyone is just really very friendly, and we all just want to learn and grow, and appreciate each other's hard work, because a lot of hard work goes into making wine.
Awesome. So all the hard work going into wine, can you tell us a little bit more about Detroit?
Yeah. So
here's the bottle. I don't know if you
maybe I can
see it.
It's probably backwards.
Yeah. Nina, can we open this up so if folks want to join the conversation, they can? But I just want to ask, did anybody get any Mawby to try during our conversation? If not, that's okay. But so this would be a good chat that you can then go to the store, maybe grab a bottle and try for yourself. Detroit is one of my favorites, also Sex. And I mentioned Red, which is a red sparkling wine, which is delicious. So talking about that hard work that goes into that glass of wine, you want to tell us a little bit about this special brand? You had already kind of mentioned it a bit, but jump in a little bit on that.
Yeah. Detroit was, I don't know when Larry first made this wine, but it is our sweetest wine, and he can be a little cheeky like that, and he wanted our sweetest wine to be named after Detroit, which can kind of be seen as a more tough city. He did that on purpose. It's a blend of several different kinds of grapes. A lot of wineries in Michigan will source fruit from out of state. Just we don't necessarily grow enough here to support the whole industry. So this is a blend of grapes from Michigan, southwest Michigan, kind of near Paw Paw, Kalamazoo area, and then from Washington State. So this is a fun one that gets people right away, usually by the name, and that's something branding wise that Larry did really well. And he's been doing it long enough that things have changed that we probably wouldn't be able to name a wine Detroit now if we were just coming up with it, or certainly name a wine Sex. Alcohol labels are regulated by the federal government, and so you have to get your wine labels and your names approved. And so Detroit was one that I don't know if it would be approved now. Sex certainly wouldn't. That was a fluke. He had tried a couple other names, and those were denied. And he said, well, I'm just going to send in Sex. And we like to say that it was either someone's first day or last day working approving labels, and it was approved. But the names are so strong, and that's usually what grabs people's attention. So you have this wine called Detroit. It's a little fruitier. It's really floral. There's some muscat grapes in there. It's a little richer. I had talked about acidity earlier. This isn't immediately acidic, which is kind of cool. It's kind of honey and got a rich mouthfeel, but then it's this nice little acidity kick at the end. And this is one that we do in our world famous Mawbys, which is a blended take on a mimosa. So you blend this with some ice and orange juice. That's always fun to drink if you're celebrating. Oh, I see a puppy. Yeah, so in Detroit, this would be one that we mentioned is tank fermented, the Charmat method. So the bubbles happen in a big stainless steel tank, and then it gets put in the bottle. But it's got a cork, it pops, it fizzes. It's really fun, and it sells very well for us.
Keep muting myself and then forgetting to unmute. So since Mike he's sipping on the cans, if you want to talk about those a little bit too, I know that's the new ones. Or Mike, if you want.
Yeah, what did Mike think?
So there's the two, the Sunlight and then Tropic. So two different, Tropic is red, Sunlight is from white, and it's Marquette is Tropic.
And then it's a little, when you pour it out, it's a little more rosé.
Right. Yes.
You kind of cut it with that water. But yeah, it's Marquette, 100%.
And then the Sunlight is
Cayuga.
So what's interesting is that it's in what's different is that it is infused with tea and botanicals, so it's not necessarily straight wine. So it has a little bit different texture. Tropic is a little bit richer than I thought it was going to be, which is great because it's the tea infused. And then the Sunlight is, if you read the description that Mawby puts out about Sunlight, there's all these botanicals that they've put into it because they're looking for, I presume you're looking for a flavor profile that you guys thought would do well. And so it's different. It's not straight rosé. It's not a straight white wine. It has all these botanical flavors to it that really make it quite interesting. So highly recommend them because they're different. They're not necessarily what you would think they would be, but they're delicious.
Mm-hmm.
Claire, can I ask you, was that part of the feedback that you got when you ran those experiments in the tasting room?
Yeah, we found we were getting a lot of, and we did our own market research. At one point, our staff break table was just covered in various cans of wine. Anytime anyone went to the store, we'd grab one. And as I mentioned, that alcohol component was a really big thing. We found there were several that were, 15, 16, 17% alcohol in a can. So we knew that by cutting the base of the wine base with water, that was going to help with that alcohol, but we didn't want it to be thin. We didn't want it to taste like that's what we had done. So when the sunlight specifically, we found that the feedback that we were getting from people was that it maybe was like it needed a little more roundness to it. But the positive feedback that we've got on all of them actually was kind of like what Mike mentioned. They weren't overly sweet. And I mean, there's nothing wrong, there's White Claws and Spritzers, and I saw that Corona has like a Spritzer out now. I mean, everyone is doing these like bubbly, fun things, but they do tend to be on the sweeter side. And so we had a lot of positive feedback from people that these weren't sweet. They're fruity, they're juicy. The Tropic has a little bit of passion fruit juice in it, and some hibiscus and rose. So it's juicier, it's fruitier, but it's not sweet. And so that was something that people seemed really pumped about.
That's great that you took that feedback and you were able to transition into making a new product line. So that's awesome. Well, I do want to open up and see if there's any questions. We've had people kind of bouncing in and out. So does anybody have any questions about kind of the business of wine? Anything that we talked about or maybe we didn't talk about?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi everyone. Sorry, I'm not in the wine industry. But I was curious, Claire, maybe you could give me any suggestions or recommendations or tips. I was wondering, as an owner, how do you, for small businesses that's outside of your industry that want to partner up with you and help you out, what's the best way, or how do you appreciate to be approached? For instance, like I usually try to match small businesses with web developers and software developers and teams to create tools, right? So my thing is, I just don't want to be a vendor that just help you just throw up anything on the internet. Okay, great. Yes, you got a website, whatever. But I really want to help small businesses create tools, internal tools that help them with their business that a lot of these mid-size and enterprise companies have resources to build in-house or even have a subscription to have on-the-shelf software, right? So, but for me to be able to do that, I really need to understand the different challenges and day-to-day problems that small businesses are often tackling. So I'm at a crossroad where I don't know how to approach you guys without asking you 20 questions.
Right.
But I want to be able to be of help, so.
Oh, that's a really great question. I think a great resource for that, this is a really good second second place, but when we used to be able to do things in person, you know, we've met so many great people, you know, mingling at various networking events. Because I think especially for businesses my size, it's that personal connection that really means the most to us. So I think, you know, when you get like the email that goes to your generic email and it's like, dear sir or madam, and maybe they even put the wrong name of the business in there. Like, I think always just taking a little extra time to really, you know, most websites now have like a people page or using LinkedIn or something. So if anytime you can make things just like a little more personal, I think that's going to put you ahead right away. And then I don't know the best way to kind of just somehow researching what those challenges are. I know for wine and for just the alcohol industry in general, like I said, there's so many regulations and there's so many loopholes. There can be so much red tape. There's a nonprofit based out of maybe it's California, called the Wine Institute, and then there's another one based out of Washington, D.C. And those are just examples, but most industries have some sort of internal-based groups like that have websites. You just can kind of see what are those issues. So I think a lot of research and keeping it personal. And Mike mentioned the cans. You know, that was a friend of our cellar master, a friend of the winemakers, like their kids. I honestly don't know this connection. He knew that we were going to be doing cans, and he just kind of mocked some things up and sent them to us. And he said, "This is my style. This is how. This is kind of how I do my art. If you're interested, I'd love to talk more." And that definitely means more of a commitment from you. You know, no, I don't think you shouldn't work for free, but I think there are those little pro bono-y kind of things that can make a difference.
Got you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
If that helps. Yeah, you're welcome.
No, it do helps. It's because I understand it's small business so broad, you know, and I realize that as developers that I try to help, they're experts in tech, and you're in small business, you're experts in your own craft, but it's like really trying to find that connection point. And it's like, I don't have like a decade, another lifetime to learn someone else's industry. So like I'm Googling like crazy, trying to figure out what are some challenges. And I appreciate you bringing up the compliance issues and the regulatory issues, you know, so it's like, because honestly, we don't build tech just for tech's sake. The tech is for a reason, and me just trying to understand what are the reasons that you guys are combating with. But I appreciate the honesty.
Yeah.
I think,
I think another good thing is a lot of small businesses, not just wineries, but small businesses, while we know the importance of tech and what can be done with like digital marketing or with certain kinds of software, but that can be very new for ownership sometimes to understand. And so anytime, you can prepare some numbers to give an idea of what that ROI is can be very, very helpful, because small businesses, there isn't just one person monitoring, and doing data and reports on ad spend, because you're doing, like I said, you're wearing these hats and doing so many other things. So I think that's another, that can be another powerful tool to show raw data and numbers. And Because sometimes, you know, you have a number or it's you have something that you're proposing for a budget, and they might just see that number. They're like, you want $10,000? You crazy? And then you can say, well, let me show you what that actually can become. So I think anytime numbers can be involved in raw data, that can be really helpful to convince the powers that be.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good luck.
Mm-hmm.
And I might just add, I think what you're doing, Helen, too, is great. Just hopping in on these chats and asking that question, I think that's your market research, right? So I think you're in the right spot to do all that stuff. And
yeah.
I think what Claire said about finding those kind of associations or like industry groups is a great place, because they probably have all of their, you know, issues kind of lined up, and they might be doing stuff to help deal with those issues too. They might be a good go-to for you, and they might facilitate introductions as needed, or, you know, things like that. But I think the digesting of information and cutting through that noise for startups is a huge resource, you know.
Yeah.
I can't, for, like you said, Claire, like you wear so many hats. Like you probably know too, Helen, you know, sitting there, you wear a lot of hats. So put yourself in their shoes, because you're doing the same thing. So, yeah.
Well, and I remember Nicole, when you were trying to figure out just how to get a liquor license, you know, and it was, I mean, the ups and downs and you know, but, I remember after that first one, which didn't go totally according to plan, but you're like, now I know how to do it, you know, and so then there's just that
learning curve.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, you know, I think just even this conversation has demonstrated that the path to business, you know, I don't even want to say success, but sustainability maybe is a better word, is not linear. You know, it goes up and down and up and down, and it continues to change with regulations, with changing customer and consumer trends, you know,
technology.
And just technology for sure. You know, like the needs internally with changing ownership and stuff. So you have to constantly be fluid. And, you know, as someone providing solutions and services to those entities, you almost have to be doubly on it, because you have to understand what they're sensitive to with respect to what's changing in front of them, but then also how you're changing in response to that to be able to meet that. And, you know, so there's a lot to juggle, but I think once you build some muscle memory around these changing things, you get better at it, and the lag time to that learning curve is a lot shorter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah. But I'm going to hop off. I have to go and tend to a baby. But I am going to leave Mike kind of stewarding the conversation. I'm sure if there's any other questions, he can help facilitate that. So I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to chat. And I definitely want to thank you, Claire, for taking the time to chat with us. I really appreciate it. And it was great to see your face.
Great to see you. It's been a while. Yeah. Thank you for including us.
Yeah, so thank you guys, and have a great week learning about business and all of that. And Mike will be back tomorrow evening if you're interested in doing joining him for another wine tasting. So there's information up on the schedule for the Detroit Startup Week. So thanks, Nina, and you all have a great evening.
Be safe out there.
Oh, yes, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So just to kind of wrap up, if anybody's got any more questions, comments? We good?
This was fun. I had a great time.
Good. All right. Nina, everybody, thanks for coming. Claire, nice to meet you virtually.
Yes, great to meet you. I know we've emailed before, so great to put a face with the name.
Yep. So everybody who jumped on, thank you. As Nicole mentioned, tomorrow, just for fun, I'm going to do a virtual happy hour, if you will. There's information and it's open. It's on the topic is Sangiovese out of Italy, and we're just going to talk wine and sip and have a little fun and have an open conversation and go from there.
And you guys have a description of what wine they should get in your description, right?
Yes, we do. Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Awesome
Sounds
sauce.
fun.
Thank-
Maybe I'll do
Everybody
it.
have a good night.
Thank
for
you,
joining me.
everyone.
Yep.
Have a great week.
Good luck, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.